My name is Cassidy Moore, and 3 years ago, I learned that betrayal tastes like lavender and burnt dreams. The scent still haunts me, that suffocating sweetness from my mother's garden mingling with the acrid smoke of my future going up in flames. It was the night before my engagement party, and I was supposed to be the happiest woman alive. Instead, I became the star of my own Greek tragedy, complete with a backstabbing sister and a faithless fiancé. The memory cuts through me like shattered crystal, finding Trevor and Clara in my parents' den, her manicured fingers tangled in his hair, his hands mapping the curves of her waist like he was memorizing forbidden territory. They were so lost in each other that they didn't notice me standing frozen in the doorway, watching my entire world collapse in real time. What followed was the kind of silence that screams louder than any argument. No apologies, no explanations, just Clara's defiant stare and Trevor's cowardly inability to meet my eyes. That night, I packed my bags and disappeared from their lives like morning mist, leaving behind only a cryptic note and a heart full of razor-sharp pain. But here's the thing about rock bottom, it's the perfect foundation for rebuilding your life into something extraordinary. 3 years earlier, the setup, looking back, the signs were there like breadcrumbs leading to disaster, but love makes you willfully blind to red flags that should have been visible from space. Clara had always been the golden child, the one who could light up a room just by walking into it, whose laugh was infectious and whose smile could melt the hardest hearts. She was chaos wrapped in charm, a hurricane disguised as a gentle breeze. And me? I was the steady one, the reliable older sister who colored inside the lines and never caused drama. Trevor seemed perfect for my quiet nature, for years of comfortable companionship, predictable date nights, and conversations that never ventured too deep. He was safe harbor in human form, or so I thought. When I flew down to Eugene for the pre-engagement festivities, Clara was already there, having mysteriously arrived a week early to help with preparations. She threw herself into party planning with suspicious enthusiasm, picking up Trevor's favorite whiskey, coordinating with florists, even suggesting the playlist that would soundtrack my supposed happily ever after. "She's just excited for you," Mom said when I mentioned Clara's unusual helpfulness, but mothers see what they want to see, especially when the truth would shatter their carefully constructed family narrative. The warning signs were subtle but persistent, the way Clara's fingers lingered on Trevor's arm during conversations, how their inside jokes excluded me, the electric tension that crackled between them when they thought no one was watching. My intuition screamed danger, but my heart desperately wanted to believe in the fairy tale. The night of the party, our backyard transformed into something from a romantic movie, fairy lights twinkling in the apple trees, the soft melody of jazz floating through the air, guests mingling with wine glasses that caught the golden hour light. I wore a pale green dress that Trevor once said brought out my eyes, and for a few precious hours, I felt like the luckiest woman alive. Then the temperature dropped, and I went inside for my shawl. The hallway was dim, the house temporarily quiet as if holding its breath. That's when I heard them, low voices, intimate whispers, Clara's breathless laugh that I'd heard 1,000 times but never in that particular octave of desire. I turned toward the den, and there they were, Trevor and Clara, gravitating toward each other like binary stars locked in fatal orbit. Her hands were in his hair, his arms circled her waist, and they were leaning in with the desperate hunger of people who'd been denying their attraction for too long. Time didn't slow down, it stopped completely. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't process what I was witnessing. They were so absorbed in each other that I became invisible, a ghost haunting my own engagement party. When Trevor finally saw me, his face crumbled into a mask of guilt and terror. Clara just blinked. No shame, no apology, just the cool assessment of someone calculating their next move. I backed away slowly, my footsteps silent on the hardwood floor. Outside, the party continued in blissful ignorance while my world imploded in slow motion. The disappearing act. I left before dawn, slipping away like a thief stealing back her own dignity. The note I left was masterfully cryptic. I need time, not an explanation, not an accusation, just 3 words that said everything and nothing. Back in Seattle, my apartment felt like a mausoleum. I methodically erased every trace of Trevor, photos, gifts, shared memories, stuffing them into boxes and shoving them into the darkest corners of my closet. I blocked numbers, muted social media accounts, and built walls so high that even my own family couldn't scale them. Work became my sanctuary. I threw myself into architectural projects with manic intensity, staying late into the night, redesigning spaces as if I could somehow redesign my own shattered life. Exhaustion became my drug of choice. If I was tired enough, I wouldn't have to feel the gaping wound where my future used to be. Months passed in a blur of coffee-stained blueprints and sleepless nights. I became a ghost of myself, haunting my own existence. Enter the plot twist. 6 months after my world ended, I forced myself to attend a gallery opening downtown. It was an act of defiance against the small, gray life I'd been living, a declaration that Clara and Trevor hadn't succeeded in breaking me completely. That's where I saw him, Damian Carter. He stood across the room like a classical sculpture come to life, tall and elegant with the kind of quiet confidence that didn't need to announce itself. I remembered him vaguely from my engagement party, one of Trevor's grad school friends. Someone Clara had mentioned in passing with that particular tone she reserved for men she wanted but couldn't quite conquer. Cassidy Moore, he said, appearing beside me as if summoned. I thought that was you. We talked about art, about the city, about everything except the elephant in the room. He asked about my work, my favorite coffee shops, whether I still sketched by hand, questions that focused on who I was, not who I used to be with. That night marked the beginning of something I hadn't expected, a second chance at happiness. The slow burn romance. Damian didn't sweep me off my feet, he caught me as I learned to fly again. Our relationship unfolded like a carefully tended garden, growing stronger with each passing season. He had the rare gift of presence, of listening not to respond but to truly understand. When I finally told him about Clara and Trevor, he didn't offer empty platitudes or demand details. He simply held space for my pain and let me heal at my own pace. We fell in love in quiet moments, rainy Sunday mornings with jazz records and strong coffee, late-night conversations about dreams and fears, shared silences that felt more intimate than words. He saw my scars and loved me not despite them, but because they were part of my story. When we decided to marry, it wasn't a grand gesture but a quiet certainty. A courthouse wedding with 2 elderly witnesses who smiled like they'd been waiting their whole lives to believe in love again. No white dress, no aisle, no family drama, just 2 people choosing each other with clear eyes and full hearts. For 2 blissful years, we built our own universe, a converted loft filled with art and laughter, dinner parties with friends who knew nothing of my past, road trips documented only in our memories. I was happy, genuinely, completely happy. The reckoning. When grandfather called about his 80th birthday dinner, I almost declined, but his voice carried the weight of 8 decades. And he was the only family member who'd never stopped reaching out during my self-imposed exile. One dinner, he said, just family. I looked at Damian, and he nodded. We'll go together, he said simply. The drive to Eugene felt like traveling back in time. Every familiar landmark carried ghosts of the girl I used to be. By the time we pulled into my parents' driveway, my hands were trembling. But Damian's steady presence reminded me, I wasn't the same broken woman who'd fled 3 years ago. I was stronger now, armored in hard-won self-respect and genuine love. The perfect moment. The house looked exactly the same, frozen in time like a museum of my former life. Mom made polite conversation while I helped set the table, both of us dancing around the elephant in the room. Then I heard them, the sharp click of heels and the heavy thud of dress shoes. Clara and Trevor, making their entrance like they owned the place. Clara recovered first when she saw me, flashing that predatory smile I remembered too well. Well, she purred, look who finally crawled out of her cave. Still playing the tragic heroine, Cass? Her eyes scanned my left hand, searching for weakness. Still flying solo, I see. Some things never change, I smiled serenely. Actually, I'm married now. The words hit the room like a thunderclap. Clara's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the shock beneath her practiced composure. My husband should be here any minute, I added casually, arranging the silverware with steady hands. As if summoned by cosmic timing, the front door opened. Footsteps crossed the hardwood floor, and then he appeared in the doorway, Damian, looking like he'd stepped off the cover of GQ in his navy coat and tailored trousers. His eyes found mine immediately, warm and unwavering. He crossed the room like he belonged there, kissing my temple as his arm circled my waist. Sorry I'm late, he murmured. Traffic was murder. I watched Clara's champagne flute slip from nerveless fingers, watched Trevor's face drain of color, watched 3 years of imagined victories crumble into dust. This was the man Clara had always wanted but could never have, the one who'd been politely immune to her charms, who'd seen right through her performance to the hollow center beneath. The meal proceeded like theater, each course revealing new layers of delicious irony. Mom peppered Damian with questions about his work, his family, our life together. Dad nodded approvingly at his thoughtful responses. Grandfather beamed like he'd orchestrated the entire evening. But Clara said nothing. She pushed food around her plate like a petulant child, shooting furtive glances between Damien and me as if trying to solve an impossible equation. The tension simmered beneath polite conversation until Clara finally cracked during grandfather's toast. She stood abruptly, tapping her glass with that familiar attention-seeking clink. "I'd like to say something about my dear sister," she announced, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "It's quite something, really, disappearing for years and then showing up with a mystery husband. Some of us believe in transparency, but I suppose others prefer living in shadows." The room held its breath. This was Clara's last desperate attempt to regain control, to make me the villain in her twisted narrative. But Trevor surprised everyone, including himself. "That's enough, Clara," he said quietly but firmly. She whirled on him, stunned. "Excuse me? You don't need to do this." Their eyes locked across the table, and whatever bond had once existed between them shattered visibly. Clara stormed out to the garden, Trevor following like a reluctant shadow. They didn't return. The sweet taste of freedom. As we said our goodbyes, grandfather squeezed my hand with his papery fingers. "You look happy, Cass," he whispered. "Really happy, I am," I whispered back. "For the first time in years, I really am." Walking to the car with Damien's hand warm in mine, I reflected on the evening's perfect symmetry. Clara thought she'd won when she stole Trevor, but she'd actually freed me to find something infinitely better. This wasn't revenge, it was evolution. I hadn't come to make them feel small, I'd come to prove to myself how far I'd traveled from that broken girl who fled in the pre-dawn darkness. As Damien started the engine, I realized the most beautiful truth of all: Clara and Trevor were relics of my past, but they held no power over my future. I was free, finally, completely, joyously free. And that freedom tasted sweeter than any revenge ever could.